Welcome back to the Non-Traditional Veterinarian, and I want to do a series with you. I want to talk about why I tested my own dog for the test that maybe you've heard me talk about. Maybe we talked about them with your pet. Maybe you have an upcoming appointment and you are excited to know what the options are. And what I want to say is that what I did for my dog may not be what your dog needs or in that order. And so I really love personalizing as much as we can for each pet because no two pets are the same. If this is the first episode that you were listening to on Spotify or Apple, or maybe watching on YouTube, it's so nice to connect. I am Dr. Beaumonte, a veterinarian of nearly 12 years, and I really embody and believe in and feel aligned with getting to the root cause rather than cookie cutter, rather than slapping a band-aid on it. Now, not to say that sometimes we don't need those band-aids, right? Have you ever cut yourself and you know that you need to adjust it later, but the band-aid is the option right now? Sometimes we need to lean on traditional, conventional opportunities, medications, diagnostics. In fact, just the other day, I took my dog to the cardiologist. We'll get more into that later. And maybe not this episode, but we will talk about it. And I'm not saying that we don't need those things, but if we can get to the root cause, so this pet, your pet, is not on a lifelong of allergy medications, a lifelong of antidiarrheals, or you can never change foods because they can't tolerate it. And so I'm going to walk you through on why I chose these tests for my dog and what they found and what I'm doing about it. And so the first one I'm going to talk about is mycotoxins and why I tested him for it. So to start off, at the time when I tested my dog, he was a little, almost 8.5 years old. So for reference, he is relatively healthy. He has had diarrhea once in his life, knock on wood. And it was the day after he had a dental cleaning. And so chalked it up to the stress, the anesthesia, bacteria relocated in his mouth. I mean, there's a lot of factors there. And so what I didn't do is I didn't blame the doctor. I didn't blame the dental and say, I'm never doing a dental again. I just supported my dog through it in a way that was also going to get him over that hump, but also not be a speed bump weeks, months down the road. So what I didn't do, and I did a podcast episode on this, so scroll back to what I did when my own dog got diarrhea. I don't remember the exact podcast number. I apologize. And what I didn't do is just throw antibiotics at him. I supported him. And literally 10 hours later, he was fine. And so some dogs that we test for mycotoxins, and I'm going to go into what that is because they're having ongoing issues where I'm really suspicious that there's a toxin issue going on. And so dogs who have chronic GI issues, chronic just inflammation in general, don't respond the way that we want them to, or they're constantly relapsing, or depending on what tests we do, seeing patterns and certain results will clue us in that, hey, we should rule out mycotoxins. And so mycotoxins are toxic compounds produced by mold. Now, not every mold does this, and not all toxic compounds, not all mycotoxins are created equal. And so they are invisible, they are odorless. You will not know that they are there, which is kind of like the unfavorable part, right? And so they can be exposed through their food or their environment or both, or even small amounts over time. And I really believe in when we have data, we can make decisions. And when we know better, we can do better. And so I'm all about not having data overload, but hey, how can we be proactive and have this information before we're being reactive and now we're trying to play catch up? And so that was the whole reason that I did these tests on my dog. I was like, you know what? He's going to be 9 next year, meaning this year, 2026. He's relatively healthy. He means the absolute world to me. I don't want to wait until something goes drastically wrong, until I feel like the carpet has been ripped out from underneath me, until I feel like my heart is shattered, where now I'm being so reactive that I'm coming from a place of stress and anxiety and urgency. And I don't know about you, but I feel like 9 out of 10 times when it is that approach, it just feels chaotic, right? Things get missed. There's stress. There's just so much to it. And I was like, you know what? I have the opportunity now to be proactive. And of course, I want all his tests to be normal. And they weren't all normal. And we're going to get into that. And so he did test positive for 3 mycotoxins. They tested for 5. He tested positive for 3. In fact, just today, I am recording this in February 2026. I just sent out his retest to see where he's at. I am hopeful that he has cleared it or we are making progress, but that is also why I like this test, is that it gives a numerical value. So it is easy to track the progress. Are we improving on some, none, all, and getting an actual numerical value versus present, not present? Because I'm like, okay, are we better or are we not? And so I actually just yesterday posted on my Instagram. If we're not connected on Instagram or even Facebook, you can find me at the _non-traditional veterinarian. I shared about a case that I have been actively involved in since August of 2025. And what I want you to know about these tests is I have some pet parents who do them all at the same time. They're like, I want to know all the information. I want to get to the bottom of this. Let's do all of them. And I have some, much like Jake's mom, who we started with one or two. We saw the progression. And I was like, hey, in fact, there was one test that I was like, based on this result, they're highly suspicious of mycotoxins. I think, especially being in Florida, and what I've learned from talking to a lot of pet parents and a lot of colleagues is that mold is not just a Southern thing. There's been states that I've heard from pet parents and colleagues of mold, and I'm like, mold grows there? And maybe that's naive of me, but mold, it can be present anywhere, especially when it's coming from food, especially when it's coming from traditional food. Doesn't matter where your dog's located, they can still get it. And so Jake specifically, we had been managing, and we finally tested him for mold. I think it was end of September, early October, and he had been detoxed for a good 8-10 weeks. In fact, we had to take a little bit slow with him, and that is why having that support is so important, because no two pets are the same. And it's very easy when I hit a speed bump to be like, abandon the plan, when it's like, no, actually, let's look at this pet, their health, and let's look at everything and see, do we just need to like pump the brakes a little bit, or is this a pause and reassess? And we retested him, and he had mold for 3 or 4, cleared. We supported his detox pathways. We got him on the right nutrition. We supported his immune system. And so I'm hoping for the same results with my dog. I also know, because my dog is not her dog, that that may not be the case. And so he tested positive for 3 mycotoxins. So trichothecines, I can never say that correctly, so don't abandon me for that. Aflatoxins and gliotoxin. And so they're very common, and they are clinically relevant. It's not just like, oops, found it, irrelevant, not clinical. And so they can, and now what I don't know is I don't know where they are coming from. And so what I do know is that I detoxed him. I don't know if my environment is a source. I did have my house checked in 2023, and it was clear. Being in Florida, though, even though I haven't had any leaks that I'm aware of, it is something I probably will have my house tested for maybe once a year, every 18 months, because I know how icky and dangerous molds and mycotoxins can be. And so I saw what it did for my own health. And so these are commonly found in environmental sources that can be damp basements, if you have a basement and you have that type of house, attics, air systems, poorly ventilated homes, compost piles, decaying organic matter. I mean, there's a lot of sources. It's not just one, and they can be exposed from many areas. Foods, a lot of, I'm not going to say every, and I'm not going to name shame here, because I honestly don't, but commercial kibble can be a source. Improperly stored pet food can be a source. Moldy grains, which are used in these kibbles, grain-based treats. Again, I'm not saying if it's not one of these that you're free and clear. It's not, but that is where it's most commonly found. Doesn't mean that's it. And there are common higher risk ingredients: corn, peanuts, cottonseed meal, soybean meal, wheat, barley, oats, rice. And let me say those again: corn, peanuts, cottonseed meal, soybean meal, wheat, barley, oats, and rice. You may commonly see these ingredients also in very traditional kibble. So that's probably why there's a correlation there. And so I can tell you that my dog does not eat corn. He does get peanut butter on occasion. He doesn't have anything with cottonseed meal, soybean meal, wheat, barley. He does get, some of his recipes do have oats and no rice. So I'm not sure. I would love to know, but I am retesting him to see what his detox has been like, his response, and then that may clue me into where these sources could be. And what I am going to say is that I plan to, even if he's clear, I'm not abandoning the test. This is something that I probably will do on him every 6 to 12 months, because I believe the data makes decisions, and I want to be an informed, proactive pet parent. And I want to know this information ahead of time rather than, okay, let me wait for something to happen, then I'm going to test again. I honestly view all of these tests as part of wellness screening panels. Just like maybe your dog gets wellness blood work or your cat gets wellness blood work every year. I think these are important tests to do with that. Now, some may need it a little bit more frequently, depending on what we're nurturing them with. But I think it is valuable to do that. And so why mycotoxins matter? So yes, they sound scary, right? And maybe you've are exposed in the sense, not you're exposed to mold, but you've been exposed to mold in the sense of like, you know how bad it can be. And so it absolutely cannot be good for the gut. It can absolutely destroy the gut damage, the gut barrier. And I look at the gut barrier as this very tight junction, and they say that, and it's this tight connection. And then when it's not, is how we get this like leaky situation. And so they can damage the lining of the gut and cause intestinal permeability, aka leaky gut. They can trigger the intestinal cells, which are enterocytes. It can trigger their apoptosis, meaning so apoptosis is this nice way of saying programmed cell death. Cells have a certain amount of time they're supposed to be around, and then they go, and the body is supposed to naturally help them get rid of it. But if we're triggering it, then we're triggering cell die off maybe earlier than it's supposed to. And they die off too quickly. And then the gut can't properly repair itself because it can't keep up. Have you guys ever seen, and this may age me. You ever seen the episode of I Love Lucy with the conveyor belt? And she can't keep up with it and she starts throwing chocolates in her mouth? That's kind of what this is like. So obviously the gut is not throwing chocolates in its mouth. That would be kind of cool. But it can't keep up with the conveyor belt. And so then these toxins can increase and the gut lining just isn't as healthy. And when we have a healthy gut lining, we are just so much more ahead. We also can have a loss of short chain fatty acids. Short chain fatty acids are oh so important. They are very, very important. They're made by healthy gut bacteria and they ferment fiber. They also feed the gut lining. They reduce inflammation. They support the immune system. They are like a power plant that is so vital. Imagine if the power plant, Lord Tampa, don't listen to me about this. Imagine if the power plant went out. That's no bueno, right? So when we have mycotoxins, it disrupts the good bacteria, which influences the short chain fatty acids. It disrupts the short chain fatty acid production, which is not good. It can increase the pro-inflammatory bacteria. So it allows these bacteria that we don't really want to be popular and be in higher numbers, they get an opportunity to elevate. And so again, this is why it's pet specific sometimes on owners will be like, what test do I run? I'm like, I wish I had a crystal ball. Because if I knew that, if I could look ahead and tell you and be like, nope, your pet's mycotoxins are fine, but this is often the stuff, this is what I do. I'm like, I don't know. This is why what I can say is we have access to all these. And sometimes we do one or two. And then based on either how they're responding or results, then patterns I'm seeing, then I say, hey, I think we should really consider testing X, Y, and Z. And so mycotoxins also cause inflammation, oxidative stress, which I feel like you probably could connect those dots, even just talking about how short chain fatty acids are affected. And so they increase oxidative stress, which is bad. We don't want that. We don't typically want that. Sometimes there's isolated incidents where we're inducing that for specific reasons, but overall, we don't want mycotoxins doing that because it keeps the immune system in a chronic state of inflammation. And inflammation is the root of so much disease. So this can show up as chronic diarrhea or loose stool, gas or bloating, poor nutrient absorption. I see that a lot in my heavy metal mineral panels that come back, that when certain minerals are deficient in certain values, the test will flag and say, consider testing for mycotoxins based on the pattern. We can have inflammatory or immune related issues. So we don't want inflammation around. Now, sometimes a little bit of like microinflammation can be good to cause cells to go to the area and heal, but we have overall chronic immune system inflammation. That immune system is under a lot of stress. And I firmly believe too that it also affects the nervous system. And it's this like inner loop. I don't think we talk about the nervous system enough with pet care, or probably even people, even though it is getting a lot more spotlight attention. And so absolutely all of this can be an overdrive. Vitamin D. So some mycotoxins interfere with vitamin D absorption and metabolism. In fact, Jake, who I alluded to earlier, his vitamin D was so low when we tested it. In fact, he had been on personalized recipes at this point, I want to say 4 or 5 weeks. And so what I don't know is I don't even know where it was before that. It could have even been a little bit lower, but he was so low. And to give you an idea, I do know his numbers off the top of my head. He was 27, I think 27 point. Okay, I said that now I don't know point, but he was 27 and change. And it was so low that the lab had even said, I would test this dog for mycotoxins. And that's why we did. And lo and behold, there they were. And so vitamin D is, and maybe you've heard this in the wellness space, depending on what kind of content you listen to, that vitamin D is more like a hormone rather than just a vitamin. It plays a role in immune regulation and gut health, inflammation control. It is so, so important in so many ways. And low or suboptimal vitamin D can often be seen alongside with chronic GI disease and cancers. There's almost always a correlation. Now it's chicken and egg, but there's almost a correlation. And so why set up your pet for this vitamin D. And so that is something I have not tested my dog for. I'm gonna be totally candid. And it's something I am testing my dog for this week exactly because I want to know. Now, it would have been nice to maybe see where it was while he was undergoing before his mold. However, it is what it is right now. And so I will be testing him. And so what do we do or what happens when mycotoxins are left unaddressed? Maybe you're thinking, okay, what happens if I don't test my dog or haven't tested my dog yet? So over time, we absolutely can, I'm not saying will, can have liver stress or dysfunction. The immune cells can become toxic, which is we don't want toxicity there. I mean, who wants toxicity in their life? But especially with immune cells, we don't want that. Ongoing inflammation, poor healing, chronic disease patterns, poor nutrient absorption. I mean, there's a lot of things that can happen. This is a whole cascade. This is a snowball rolling down the hill, getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So what I am doing for my dog is I'm hopeful that I will identify and remove the source. And I know that that may not be possible entirely. And that is okay when that doesn't happen. We like it to happen so that we remove the source and we're not detoxing and then just re-exposing. So I'm going to try my best to find it, but what I am not going to stress over it because that's not good for him or me. What I am going to do is I'm going to support him. And so I am going to support him in detoxing. That's what I have been doing. So easy ways, there are easy ways and there are intentional ways. So easy way, hydration. That supports toxic elimination because while we're detoxing them, we want to make sure they can actually get it out of their system. And because this is a test, which I didn't allude to, is a urine test, that's already showing that it's in the body's getting rid of it, but we just have to like completely remove it. So movement supports lymphatic flow. That is the lymphatics don't have their own circulation, so it needs to be supported. So movement, he goes on walks at least twice a day when it's nice out, like it has been. Sometimes it's 3 or 4 times a day. He does go out in my backyard, but I look at backyard movement very different than walking. Walking is intentional movement. We're in the backyard, stand around, sniff, walk a little bit. So intentional movement and a high fiber diet to help bind and remove those toxins. So adding fiber to his diet, supporting him, helping him detox. I also had him on a special clay for almost 8 weeks to help do that as well. And so what I can't tell you is exactly what your dog would need because support is individualized. And I think that's where we really can really help really hit like the home run there is, and it doesn't mean it's going to happen overnight, but when it's individualized, it supports not only that pet, but that pet parent. And so what that looks like, maybe what a 3-year-old dog or 2-year-old dog with mold to be very different than a 14-year-old dog with mold, potentially, depending on what comorbidities, what other things are going on. And so relevant organ testing, like wellness blood work, can be helpful as well. And so I have several patients right now that have liver elevations that some of them we've not done this test on and some we have. And I'm like, that may be it. But there's also other toxins. And so mycotoxin is suggested to be repeated about 2 to 4 weeks after they've been on their personalized detox protocol. And so I went a little bit longer with my dog. And so I was using RX clay because it helps bind certain mycotoxins in the gut and it absorbs inflammatory byproducts. And so you have to be careful when you're detoxing that the body can actually support it. So it's been used a long time and even animal feed because and because animal feed can sometimes be a source of mycotoxins and even glyphosate. We'll get to that in another episode. And so binders also bind nutrients. The duration and the dosage matters because it's not a one size fits all. And mineral support may be needed. I had also checked his minerals, so I knew where they were before. So always under veterinary guidance. And so what I want to do right now is that if you're like, this is what I've been looking for my pet, I'm going to drop links below where we can work together. We can help be as a team to help support this for you and your pet. And so mycotoxin testing doesn't create a problem. It reveals it. It reveals what may be silently driving the chronic inflammation, the ongoing poop issues, ongoing liver elevations that are, we just see this in older pets. It could be their allergies, their constant itching. I will tell you that my dog itched a lot, or I don't say a lot for him. I wouldn't say it's a lot being in practice and seeing itchy dogs. He itched quite a bit for him. And I think it was his detoxing. So if your dog has ongoing GI issues, inflammation, weight issues, poor response to diet changes, lower inconsistent vitamin D, skin issues, it may be time to look deeper and not just try another food, not just try another medication. So this is where personalized testing and interpretation matters. And this is why it is so important to help nurture that pet and that pet parent. And so I want to invite you to tag along, follow if you're not already following, because I'm also in next episode, I'm going to go over his glyphosate testing. So what I did, why I tested him, what I found out, how am I supporting him? Did he have it? Where are common sources? And so check out next episode. Looking forward to it.